Okay, thanks. Ashley.
All right, awesome. Hello, amazing humans. It's so great to have the opportunity to chat with you all. And I have a complex topic, so I'm just gonna go ahead and get started and share my screen and walk you through what this looks like. Um, with intersectionality, it's very complex. This conversation is not just about treating everyone as a unique individual. That's what we do in the business, as coaches, as leaders, as mentors of our team. This is more about understanding the driving behavior behind what may influence your team. So ultimately, we understand that a team that feels supported, that feels heard and seen, is a lot more likely to produce amazing KPIs. So at the bottom line is, providing them this additional support will help with your retention efforts of your team as well. So this is a hugely layered topic. It would take me hours to do this topic justice, but I definitely wanted to lay down the groundwork so you can understand exactly what we're talking about in this conversation. So with intersectionality, it's talking about everyone's identity. So there are so many interconnected identities that each of us individually have. It could be our race, our gender, our economic class, and other factors, including disabilities. And because we have these interconnected identities, there are different overlapping systems of oppression at play and discrimination, as well as privilege that may impact and affect each layer or each class differently. And so when you're looking at this, you're looking at all the power structures at play in society and how these diverse complexities impact the day-to-day of your team members. So I have worked in tech for a while, and I use the demographics that are listed for tech for this slide and example. So when we're looking at an example and we're just segmenting it by gender, we're looking at there's an overwhelming number of more male to female counterparts. And then when I break that down for gender into race, the power of race, I don't know about any of you remember the Energizer Bunny. Do they still use that? I'm not sure. But when you break down the team size, mostly it's 62% are white, 20% Asian, and then Latinx and Black are 8 and 7% respectively. But when it comes to those who are making decisions about where a company goes, 83% of them are white executives. So this is just an example of the power dynamic is very adjusted based on where someone may lie within that. So Harvard recently did a study. I wanted to kind of make this a bit more, what's happening today. So Harvard did a study where intersectionality plays a huge role in not just how we navigate recruitment, but also how we navigate the entire work experience. The thing is that especially since 2020, when we started working from home, there's been a huge shift in us talking about DEI, making sure that we're recruiting people of diverse backgrounds, to make sure that we're doing all the measures to make sure that we're bringing in different voices and empowering those who may not have previously had an opportunity. The issue with that is that we then didn't tackle the issue of the culture of a company to help retain that talent. So when Harvard did the study, they found that, for example, the whiter the team, the more Black women were likely to get passed over for promotions and quit. There's an amazing TikTok and article on this. We'll of course be sharing the deck, so you'll have access to this information to see it and review it in your time. But what it's saying is that with the more people, more white their team were, it was the more likely that there were so many nuances where were not getting the coaching that they needed, that they had different perceived misconceptions about them that also impacted how they were treated in their environment. And many were looked over or eventually quit due to that lack of support, much more than any other dynamic of employee for that organization. And this was just a recent study, and the results were just released late last year. So the reason that this topic is also complex is that there are so many different ways and types of diversity. This is an iceberg. So in an iceberg, as you can, with Titanic, the biggest part is what's under the surface, right? So the top of our iceberg is things that are typically visible. We have a person's race is typically visible, age sometimes depending on your skincare regime. Your appearance, your visual disability, like if I can see that there is a disability, and also your assumed gender if you identify as that. Below the surface, all of these things are impacting our day in and day out, and there are systems of privilege as well as oppression at play with all of these areas, including our family status. We recently had a talk led by Davida on ADHD, autism, neurodiversity, and how that plays a role. But for example, I am neurodiverse, but I also can identify with race. Age, I finally got the over 40 card, um, as well as a female. And then when you think about ethnicity versus nationality, people's sexual identity and sexual orientation, this isn't about saying this is how things should be or not. This is more so showing that we all have different backgrounds and lives, and these specific nuances related to diversity has their own specific set of challenges associated with that. So as you layer on those experiences, it then creates a different dynamic that we may seem as someone is particularly quiet or they aren't speaking up. It could be due to a layer that they haven't been able to have a voice, or having a voice has been seen and perceived as negative, because then we have the stigma. For example, I deal with particularly, which would be the angry Black woman stigma, where if we do complain, it's then looked at that we're being combative instead of providing feedback. So one of the examples at work I wanted to talk about, or just give it a more layered so you can see, is this could be one person dealing with us. So there could be a racial imbalance. For example, Black employees face backlash when they self-promote to white managers at work. And the reason, and we always get coaching and feedback, is to self-promote, talk about your wins and advantages. But when they did a study about that, they saw that Black employees actually get backlash for trying to promote themselves. So that is one example of where it sometimes may look like black and white, but there's so many shades of gray involved. Layer on disabilities. And this isn't just the visible, but also the invisible disabilities. And then income disparities. I know a lot of us in customer service, and historically CS is, with customer service, a lot of our team members are usually the lowest paid. I just saw a LinkedIn post regarding this. Like, why is it that CS is typically the lowest paid role? And this also can lead to your team members having issues with income and income disparities. That could also lead to missing work because I can't find childcare, or I can't have reliable transportation based on income, or where I'm living, food deserts. For example, I'm not able to get the nutritious food that I need for my family because of where I live and my social economic environment. And then there's the emotional labor that ties to all of these issues, that all of these issues layer on the stress tide. So there is a quote from Audre Lorde that says, "There's no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live in single issue lives." So this is an example of one of the slides that I use for meetings that I lead with my team, because I know that since people are coming from different ways and different avenues, how people communicate with each other is also going to be diverse too. And sometimes people aren't confident to be on camera, especially in a remote environment, or sometimes they don't feel comfortable to share their ideas and perspectives because when they've done so in the past, or they haven't had the support needed in order to be able to speak up. They lack that ability. So for me, I offer channels. All right. So if you find your space and you have your voice, share your thoughts on the mic. I know everyone probably has a team member who has no issue speaking up and they are so vocal, and they will always bring a question to the front and will make sure they're heard, right? Some people are issues with raising their hands. I have ADHD. I am an over talker. I really try hard not to over talk people, but it happens. So sometimes I use the raise the hand to help give me space to give that to give a response without trying to catch in the break between people talking. I've been using the Zoom whiteboard, which is similar to Miro boards if you use that before. And with this can create like a virtual workspace where people can bring up and give ideas in an environment so that no matter how they're working, if they're able to share, similar to what we're about to do in the breakout rooms. We're in a virtual whiteboard where we're sharing and giving ideas with each other. And then there's chat. And I just say, regardless of what channel you choose, your ideas are as important. So giving people space to have those conversations in a way that's authentic to them is very important. Also, I make camera voluntary, or even have days where there's no camera as well. A lot of you are in person, so it may not always apply to you, but there's non-initial steps that I really just want to nail in that these are more thoughts to consider. Acknowledge your own bias. Someone mentioned in the chat unconscious bias. No matter how much education or how many books you read, there's always going to be bias. Everyone has an innate bias, and it is important for us to acknowledge and learn from it. I do have a resource attached where you can take a quiz provided by Harvard. You're able to see which particular areas that may fall under that bias. Also, seek feedback and diversify your networks. If you're looking at the people that you connect with on a day-to-day basis and you're not seeing diversity, and this is not just about race, this is about or gender, this is about those invisible things that you may not see in the forefront. Look in your community for people that you can connect with and learn from, because that education and educating yourself is going to be so key and critical to get in that additional nuance about your team members. Interrupt bias in others. All of us are leaders in some ways, and it's up to us to be seen as people who are trying to work against bias and issues within our teams. Being able to confront that is going to also empower your team to feel comfortable and that you support them being the authentic selves. And that includes challenging stereotypes and always learning. Practicing mindfulness and promoting inclusive language are just two other keys that help us also take care of yourself. Look, this is not an easy topic to dive into or delve into. It is so hard to do the work, and it takes a lot of emotional labor. I have participated on the DEI committee at my job for 4 to 5 sessions, 3 years now, and it's such an emotional labor that you do need to practice mindfulness and self-care as you start learning more and more about each other. So for me, the takeaway is you're going to be learning your team, or you may already have learned and you feel like I know my members. I know exactly what they're dealing with, and I'm still learning always about them, but give them space to communicate and play the long game. I listen and learn before doing and saying anything. So take time and learn before response. The thing especially when DEI, is that you can't wait until you have the perfect thing to say. You have to say it imperfectly sometimes because it's needed to be said at that moment. Um, I probably would say some things even in this talk that aren't perfect, but it's also about intention behind the words too. Not just one-on-ones, but skip levels too. Make sure that you're not just addressing the people who report directly to you, but those who report directly to your other leaders, because this is key to understanding if there are breakdowns or ways that they're not being supported by their managers and nuances that they may not know. And I say play the long game because the first one-on-one or the second or the third probably aren't going to yield you the results that you're looking for. You're going to have to wait till someone trusts you in order to feel like you're actually going to do something about their issues before they'll give that additional layer to you. And this is really about psychological safety. Do they feel safe with you? And make sure that they feel like there won't be any discrimination or oppression provided from you. Like, I'm here to support you and I want you to win, because when you win, I win. So these are just the key takeaways I just want you to leave with. Is support inclusive initiatives. Look for some organizations in your area that support that, so you can have a way to learn and diversify your network. Seek feedback and improvements from your org and areas. Advocate for continued improvement. Advocate. A lot of companies are cutting their DEI budget now. Advocate for the importance of doing that in retention efforts. Is going to be huge to show that you're supporting your team being who they are. Challenge unconscious bias. First of all, learn your own biases. Again, the survey that you can take to start learning this, but this is a lifetime learning. This isn't just a one-time learning. Look for mentorship and true allyship. So it's supporting and advocating for your colleagues, particularly in moments of discrimination or bias. So here's some resources and links. You can take the Harvard Association test. Also, it's very good for you to start learning about psychological safety at work, as well as authentic allyship. These are the two areas for any member. If this is something new to you, it's a great place for you to start with the research needed. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ashley. If you could go back to the slide really quick with the 9
I'll reshare
lenses. What I'd love for you all to do, because this is going to be the jumping off point for our breakout rooms, is to consider, as we look at supporting our group right here, 9 initial steps. Perfect. If y'all want to take a screenshot of that, I think this is going to be the basis for our conversation in our breakout rooms. So I'll leave that up there for a second. Also, of course, let's thank Ashley. Happy hands, clap. So much, Ashley, for your time. That I know that it takes a lot of courage to talk about topics like this. And one of the coolest things that I see on a regular basis is we had a wonderful presentation. Ashley already mentioned it with Davita, who was talking about OCD, and the panel discussion afterward was incredible. Ashley, I think you were there. One of the members that stuck around for that recorded panel discussion shared that he found out he was ADHD later on in his career. So at that point, he was already a CS executive. And then he was later diagnosed with ADHD. He had it the entire time. And his perspective was so interesting because he was able to identify team members that struggled potentially with the same thing that he did. It actually made him a better leader. So he was able to take, ADHD as a leader and help others and lift them up. And I thought his story was so cool. So I'd recommend going back and looking at that recording. And you can see here in the chat that others also shared that, from a neurodiverse perspective, people are out there and people are doing some really cool things. Another quick story. A friend of mine has had ADHD his whole life. Well, obviously, but he was going to college and it wasn't looking like he was going to be able to graduate college. He went to his roommates and he pulled them up to the library every single week. He did that selfishly because without having friends at the library, he wasn't going to be able to study what he needed to study. So he said that was his way of kind of maximizing, getting help in getting through school. What was so cool about that was that graduating day, those 3 friends came to him and they said, Matt, we would not have graduated if you hadn't have pulled us into the library. So we thank you so much because you brought us in. And so to your point, a lot of those things that you brought up there, Ashley, like this is where things get really cool and beautiful from a leadership perspective. So thank you so much for bringing that up and having this conversation here today. All right. So, Ashley, thank you. I'm going to remove Spotlight here for a second, and we're going to get ready for our breakout rooms. Now, the discussion for our breakout rooms is, I'm going to post it in the channel. What I'd love for you to do now is we kind of shift gears And we're going to take a lot of the topics that were discussed and a lot of the things that stood out to you, and we're going to use that as our lens. So we're going to put that, what Ashley just presented on, as our lens. And now what I'd like for you to do is to look out at your team, think about your team members right now, and what opportunities do you see within your team to foster a more supportive environment? Another quick story. When I was over client success, it was for a tech startup. There were about 30 CS members. Snow days always came up. I didn't have kids at the time. My whole attitude was you have to be at work on time. And I didn't understand what it was like to drop kids off with not foster care, but drop kids off at daycare and how expensive that was. And if I had just taken a moment to understand, so we had some single parents in the team, how hard it was for them to get their kids to childcare and back over, like it would have just changed the way that I was a leader. So being able to look underneath that iceberg a bit, I think is important. So that's what I want you to be thinking about is what are some ways that we can foster a more supportive environment that helps our teams be seen, heard, respected to create that psychological safety. We're going to put you in groups of 5, actually, and I'm going to give you, we'll do 15 minutes in a breakout room to just kind of share some of those things. Think about some of the things that you're doing. Think about maybe some of the things that you could potentially do. Ashley gave us some good ideas as far as skip levels, doing multiple skip levels. What are some of those things that you do to help create that supportive environment for your team? So with that, I'm going to stop the recording.